Oh yeah, and the hammer and bell are magical or something. It's
and have the power to turn people into rats, which is like,
or have a Merry
why?
Christmas or
Well,
something.
you guys don't have a golden rat hammer. That's in every town hall in the UK. Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day. They break the emergency glass every Christmas, and they sort of hold the hammer to the bell and go, "Shall we all be rats this year?" And they sort of have audiences shout.
No rat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Lord Mayor will kind of put his hand to his ear and go, "I think I hear some yeses." And everybody go, "No." And they go, "Okay, no rats this year. Go and have a good Christmas, everyone. Bye-bye. Next year we might do rats, but..."
I can't even judge that. We have Groundhog's Day. I can't judge if that works.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and today I'm joined once more by Dan from TYTD Reviews to talk about the story of Dick Whittington and his cat. But this time we're also joined by Jenna West, aka Phantomwise, because I wanted to do a deeper dive into this story, and Jenna has just as much of, if not more of a fascination with fairy/folktales as I do, and I thought that this episode would benefit from her joining us. In the first episode that Dan and I did, we just looked at the ITV pantomime as a follow-up to our other holiday pantomime episodes we did back during Christmas in July this summer. In this episode, I wanted to take a closer look at the legend of Dick Whittington itself, see how it all began and how it evolved over the centuries. To that end, I picked out a wide variety of versions for us to watch, some of which are available on YouTube. Some, unfortunately, have already disappeared since we recorded. I went back to one of the main topics of our discussion, a 2022 CBeebies pantomime, literally just a day or two after we recorded, and it had already been scrubbed from the internet, though you can still find clips on YouTube if you're interested. Besides that one, we also touch on a pantomime from the Roses, a poem by Roald Dahl, a 1930s Ub Iwerks cartoon, and another episode of the anime that Jenna and I have covered several times in the past, Manga Sekai Mukashi Banashi, or Manga Fairy Tales of the World. One note before we begin, technically this is the extended version of the podcast, which I normally would save for Patreon. I have a bunch of tangents I'd planned on cutting, but I decided against it for this one. I figured this is already an obscure topic about an obscure literary and historical figure. If you're here for that kind of a conversation, I doubt you're going to care if we go off on various pantomime and literary related tangents. And also it's Christmas, so you can just consider the extended version a gift from us to you. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Let's get into this extremely deep dive into the centuries-old story of Dick Whittington and his cat. So, Dan and I have talked a bit about Dick Whittington before because we did a pantomime version, but we did it more in the context of just talking about different pantomimes. I'm curious about this story. So, even though we've talked a bit about it before, like, what is your familiarity with this? Like for me, I only heard about this story when I started looking into pantomime. Like it was just one of the ones that was always listed in lists of pantomimes that people do. And my first thought was like all the other things were fairy tales. So I was like, what is this? Like, is this something that like a more recent thing that somebody's made up? I had no idea this was a story that goes back to like the 1600s. So yeah, I was completely unfamiliar with this story.
On my own perspective, I was aware of Dick Whittington as a story for pretty much my entire life, especially as a kid growing up. I don't believe I ever actually saw it in panto, and I don't believe really that I ever properly sat and went through the story. I was aware of the kind of core concept of a poor boy and his cat go to London to try and seek their fortune, and dum-de-dum-dum-dum, question mark, question mark, question mark, he's the Lord Mayor now. But but the sort of more intimate details of the plotting, I don't think I really got into until when Jonathan very kindly asked me if I'd be interested in exploring the wonderful world of pantomime, which I'm always going to be more than up for that. And I watched it for the first time with him on the last podcast, and I quite enjoyed it.
So my experience has been, I had no idea what this was until Jonathan asked me. I know it was apparently an episode on Manga Sekai Mukashi Banashi, which is, I have a lot of episodes of that show on my YouTube channel, Love Gift of a Fairy Tale. But I lost access to the part of the show that had that episode, so I never really got that far in that. So by the time Jonathan asked me to be part of this, I was just like, I have never heard of that. What is that? And I asked my boyfriend, and he's like, "Oh, it's like a Puss in Boots." And I was like, "Okay, well, that should be fun." And it's like nothing like Puss in Boots. It's just a cat. And so he's like, "Oh, I must have gotten confused or something." It's like, okay, but yeah. Or I do kind of see elements of Puss in Boots in this a little bit, kind of in regards to like a fantastic cat. But yeah, this is my first introduction to it, so I'm going in. I went in totally blind. Has anyone done any of the background research into this folklore, like the origins? Because I did do a little bit.
I've read the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, okay, me too.
Dick Whittington, it was a real person.
Yeah.
Which I also had no idea about. I've never heard of Richard Whittington, Lord Mayor of London. He was somebody who was born in the 1300s. So he I guess, ascended into legend, and then by the 1600s, he started becoming the subject of a play that just keeps evolving and evolving and evolving.
And he was like 3 times Lord Mayor as well, I believe. But like everything else is nonsense, apparently.
Well, I was pretty sure the talking cat was real, but
Oh, I don't know about that. But I thought the most interesting thing was that he actually. So the story always makes it like the story is always different in each adaptation, as far as I could tell. But it always starts that he's like Dick is a poor boy, but in reality he came from a well-off family, or at least not a poor family. So it's interesting to me that he somehow became a legend of being impoverished and making his way out of poverty.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well is just how much the story evolved and changed on a regional level. Like basically, as that story traveled from wherever it was initially conceived throughout the country, variations on that story almost happened instantaneously. And there'd be iterations of this that were told in Edinburgh that were completely different from versions told in Yorkshire, that were completely different from versions told in Devon. Which is fascinating. Like the core beats would still kind of be there. Boy goes to London to seek his fortune, becomes mayor of London. But the logistics of how we arrive at those points would vary very much depending on region to region. And then obviously once pantomime really kind of started to bed in across the country and the story made its way into the panto world, it basically became a free-for-all, because any production company could do an adaptation of Dick Whittington, and as long as they kept those 2 kind of core beats in place, it was an entirely creative liberty, as you'll see as we go through these various adaptations, as to how they achieve those points. Like sometimes there's bits where it'll be like more bedded in than others, but by and large, as long as it's boy goes to seek his fortune, becomes Lord Mayor, anything that happens between those 2 points is basically whatever the writer wanted to put in.
That is so broad. It's such broad 2 points. I will say, like, I imagine Jonathan invited me here because I've showed interest in like how stories evolve over time and the different adaptations, and especially as I have a particular interest in Alice in Wonderland adaptations, which definitely are different. And it's funny though, because it's very easy for me to keep those apart in my mind. But like the Dick Whittington, it's all like jumbled in my head. It like mass of spaghetti. I'm like, what are the points that always happen? There's always a cat. There's always a ship. There's something about turning back. It's I don't know. What are the points? It's very scrambled in my mind.
I wrote down all the points that, because I've, even beyond the ones we're going to specifically talk about, I kept looking up versions of the story, mostly like for little children, just like really simple versions of the story, so I could like make out what the basic plot of the story was. The main points that almost all of them, not every single one, but almost all of them hit, is Dick Whittington is a poor child from the countryside going to London to find his fortune. Sometimes he has a cat at the very beginning of the story. Sometimes he doesn't get it till later. And then in London, he finds a rich merchant who takes pity on him and gives him a job, almost always named Fitzwarren. Not always, but usually. And I think that maybe was a real person. I can't remember for sure.
Well, his wife is the real Richard Whittington's wife was Alice Fitzwarren.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
true. So there would have had to have been a real Fitzwarren. Whether or not this specific thing happened to him, like getting a job with him, I'm
yeah,
not sure about. But yes, he has a daughter named Alice, and also almost always has a cook who is like the worst. Like she's a very awful person.
or the best, depending.
Depending
Mm.
on the story, I was surprised because like I got used to the cook being an like evil, and then I started getting into the pantomime ones, and I'm like, okay, so the cook is not evil in the pantomimes usually.
Mm. Yeah, no, the norm. She's normally kind of, um, what's the best word? Unintentionally like sassy, maybe. Like the pantomimes I've seen, she's not been particularly malicious, but there's just been moments
Uh-huh.
where it's been like, oh well, that's a sentence to say with your mouth. Okay, what else are we? What else is going on here?
Yeah,
Pocket sausages. Okay, why not?
and normally like in the original stories, she's just awful. She's a bully, if not
Yeah,
downright abusive.
Mm.
But then there's also the problem of rats. Usually, rats overrunning Fitzwarren's kitchen, and depending on the version, sometimes there's so many rats they bother Dick all night while he's sleeping, and this that usually happens in the versions where he does not have a cat at the beginning, and that prompts him to go out and buy a cat.
or sometimes he's in the attic, not the kitchen.
Yeah.
Either way, it can change, but there's usually rats involved somehow once he gets involved in the Fitzwarren household. And then at some point, Fitzwarren goes on a journey to go trade with foreign lands, and what the foreign land is always seems to change in various versions. It usually involves some sort of stereotype.
I find like some African kind of country, it seems to be the commonality.
It's usually some combination of like Africa or the Middle East, one or the other or
Mm.
both. And
Yeah,
it's never really said. You just kind of see like little bits of stereotypes in the different things, whether it's the way the people talk or the decorations or clothes.
mm,
Mm.
And then there's like two different reasons for why the cat ends up going with Fitzwarren. Either he has a rat problem on the ship and he needs a cat to go with him on the journey and keep the rats at bay, or he asks Dick if he has anything he wants to sell in the foreign lands, and the only thing he has is the cat, and he sends the cat with him.
I've noticed there's some newer versions of the fairy tale, or not fairy tale, it's not fairy tale, folk tale, where Dick goes with
That seems to
Fitzwarren.
happen more in the pantomimes. Like not
Mm.
Yeah,
always, but like the pantomimes seem to be like I don't know the entire history of how the story evolved, but it feels like the Dick going with Fitzwarren is like a staple of the pantomimes. But in like the older folk tales, the shorter versions, he does not go. He sends the cat
yeah,
with him.
because it's boring.
Yes, I much prefer the versions where he actually goes on the journey.
Yeah, well, it's boring to
Yeah.
just be like, I sent my cat off.
Yes.
He's having adventures.
Yes.
I would also say as well that usually in the pantomime versions, the role of Dick is usually cast by a particularly notable celebrity at the time. It's normally like one of the big names. So having your big name actor disappear about a quarter of the way into the second act and then not turn up again till the end,
Yeah.
probably would not be seen as value for money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can probably sum up why the story varies so much across both panto and serious adaptation. And it's three words, which is alcohol was involved. Um, Basically, because the story travelled from word of mouth and changed from region to region, would be told in pubs, clubs, things like that. People, gentlemen, sort of establishments where people could get together and have a few ales and tell interesting stories to one another. The stories would sort of be passed from patron to patron in bars, and eventually would be told to kids as stories, and then the kids would grow up, but they wouldn't remember the exact details either. And documentation was kind of skimpy at the time because the sort of rate of people with alliteration back then was incredibly high. So yeah, the end result is there's so many different adaptations just purely because it was carried by memory and word of mouth. There was a similar situation I seem to recall with a limerick. Is it a limerick or a short story called "The Lion and Albert"? That is another quite
I'm not.
old story. But again, that passed from memory from person to person and was documented here and there, but because, writing was a skill back then. Not that it isn't now, but it was like, you can write, that's amazing, versus you can write good. Um, it meant that there just wasn't that many people there to document these things for people to be able to read. And as we've seen, Jonathan very kindly provided us with a number of examples of Dick Whittington adaptations for this cast, and each one of them more or less sticks to some of the key beats, but some
go off in wildly different directions. But yes, for the most part, it is usually the same key beats.
Oh wait, we missed a couple beats. I think there's usually a point in the story. It's different in each one about why, but Dick begins to leave London. And
from what I remember, it's usually the cook's bullying. Like, she gets so bad, he decides he's going to leave. Maybe the alcohol explains this part of the story, because this is like the most confusing part to me. Like, I don't know where this came from, but usually when he leaves, he starts hearing the bells of London ringing, calling him back, saying, "Turn around, Dick Whittington, Lord Mayor of London." And this is like foretelling that he will someday become the mayor when he grows up.
It'll even say thrice Mayor of London too. Like
like the bells keep pealing, but speaking to him specifically.
And I think it's also specifically the bells of like Bow Street. And,
yeah. Again, it depends on the adaptation. Some adaptations will have that rhyme just be sort of tuned in a very kind of, ding dong bell tone. So, ding dong ding. Others will adapt it from a nursery rhyme over here called Oranges and Lemons, which is a song about the bells of London. There's oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clements, and you would sing that tune to that verse. So it would be, "Turn round, Dick Whittington, Lord Mayor of London," which, again, alcohol was probably involved. But you could imagine a bawdy pub in the 15th century with a load of ale swilling, workers getting together in an evening and all singing the tales of
as they tell the story.
Absolutely, because if there's one thing us British people love, it's a good sing song. Let me tell you.
Another point. We also forgot to say Dick always becomes rich by the end because the cat is sold, or is either sold to the foreign country for its catchy powers, or is paid for its services.
Yes.
So, and that's the story. Can I just say, I think the original version of the story is quite boring.
It kind of is. And as I've been going through this, I was thinking to myself, like, when I first heard about this, I was like, why is this a story that is so old, but it is almost never adapted outside of pantomime? And then the more I watched, I was like, it's because there's not really a whole lot to this story. And when it's done in pantomime, they add so much to this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This story is very much a blank canvas story. Yes. It's like, okay, here are your 3 acts. Everything else is yours. Enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with the joy of Panto as well, is because there's so much room for creative liberties. You could go and see 4 different Dick Whittington adaptations in Panto this year, and not one of them would be identical to the other than those sort of key core beats. And even then, as is illustrated by the CBeebies pantomime that Jonathan has sent our way, even that doesn't mean that the key beats will stay the same. No. You can have just a completely different story that just happens to be called Dick Whittington.
Yes. Yeah. It is interesting, though, because I didn't go through like all of the different, there's so many pantomimes you can find on YouTube. I kind of skipped around a bit on some of them, but it seems like there is some elements that are usually added to a pantomime version, and whether or not there is some ancient pantomime that is like the Bible that they all go back to. But it seems like they always add a character named Jack, a Rat King, and a fairy. And usually Jack and the Rat King make an alliance to frame Dick for something.
Fairies are common in pantos, right? In general?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and to be honest, there's kind of a BCAD moment with pantomimes that you kind of have to bear in mind, which is pantomimes pre-World War One, kind of maybe late Victorian era pre-World War One, were quite different beasts to pantomimes post-World War One and post the Victorian age. Pantomime previously was kind of more like a farce theatrical performance. It wasn't played in, directly as comedy. It wasn't formatted in the way that a lot of these examples that we can see are shown. It was more theatrical. It was more played as almost like a comedy drama rather than an all-out slapstick kind of joke kind of story. But then during the late Victorian era in World War One, vaudeville and music hall and all of that kind of comedy became a lot more prominent and a lot more prevalent. And especially as you were going towards the sort of 20s and 30s, it really hit its stride and celebrities started rising out of the music hall industry, and they had a very distinct style of comedy. And they would often be drafted in to take part in pantomimes because they were just kind of seen like a good enough fit. It was like, well, he's a comedian, he can do jokes really, really quickly, sort of scattergun, or she's a really good singer and can be funny, we'll get her in as well. And they would group these music hall people into pantomime. And then obviously radio became a big thing, and these music hall people would also transition into radio and then come into pantomime from the radio background where they became successful. And the whole thing kind of morphed more into less theatrically minded and more it's a comedy show that happens to have a story. And contemporary pantomime, as we know it today, really stemmed out of the music hall and out of vaudeville and out of that type of humor more. Whereas before, I won't say it was serious, but it was distinctly less slapsticky, distinctly less messy, distinctly less child oriented. It was more of a family thing. Whereas post music hall panto is very much more grounded in it's a show for the children with some slightly more risque jokes for adults.
So I mean, like, the end result is an interesting mishmash of like modern day influences, but also like traditions mixed in as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think this is just me as an American coming in from the outside, but at least two regarding like the Rat King and the fairy, I think those are like two traditions. So the fairy is a very Victorian traditional figure that I think probably has remained just because kids love fairies.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But like as soon as I heard about a pantomime fairy, I was like, oh yeah, that's so like Victorian theater, lowbrow entertainment. And well, that and the Victorians were also just really into fairies in general.
Yeah.
And then I noticed like a villain character is really popular in this kind of entertainment because you gotta boo the villain character. But the original story doesn't have a villain, besides maybe the cook. But over time, the cook, my guess is the cook started being played by dames, and people like the pantomime dame.
Yes,
So they ended
absolutely.
up, yeah. So they ended, and that and the cat never, the dame, like the cook character doesn't really have. There's some versions, there is a version where the cook kind of gets her recompense of like I was wrong to treat Dick like that. If the cook is a mean person in that version, but I think over time in pantomimes they ended up putting in this Rat King because the cat goes directly against the rats.
Mm-hmm.
So like it just kind of makes more sense to have a Rat King because people still want to boo. It's separate from the Dame, who normally is a figure people do like. It seems like to me. I don't know. So yeah, it kind of feels like it had to be altered to fit into the pantomime medium, for lack of a better word, format, better word.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose another way to look at it as well, specifically with post-musical type pantomimes, is the scripts would be adapted to whatever cast they could get. So hypothetically, if you were in Blackpool and all of the good musical comedians had been taken, but you had somehow managed to secure the Three Stooges, you would maybe have three panto dames, or you would have some kind of scenario where there were extra characters added just so that you could make sure that the Stooges got to do their Stooge thing on stage a bit, so that people would be able to enjoy it, but it would still be framed as the story. So I don't know, if it was Dick Whittington, you would
Definitely.
probably have Curly as the kook, Mo as Dick Whittington, and Larry as the cat, and that would be that would be their interactions for the entire show, and it would be very much more centered around the big name that they pulled in, because obviously, especially post 1920s going into the 1930s, there was a real rise of the celebrity, so to speak, and obviously radio really helped people pick up careers and names, and you'd have a lot more comedians and a lot more kind of people who could tell good stories, things like that. Stanley Unwin was a very good one, and he used to do various bits for pantomime in terms of writing and starring in them. But it would be the case of it was luck of the draw, depending on where you were in the country. You could end up, if you were in London, scoring like some of the biggest names of the time to play Dick and the Cat and the Kook and all of these things. But if you were, I don't know, in Peterborough or Slough, where more people, the more of these famous comedians had been picked up before they got to you, you'd probably end up with, I don't know, a background extra on a comedy show who was vaguely recognizable, and he'd be like the lead role. And people would still be excited to see it, but they were really coming more just to see the sort of comedic shtick that the writers and the comedians who were tied to it would be able to perform. The story was almost kind of surplus to the odyssey that the talent would take you through on that journey. A
That's
recurring
what I'm getting
character.
with the different ones that we've been talking about. Just the story almost doesn't matter.
Mm. No, absolutely. I mean, a recurring actor who turns up in pantos all the time, and me and Jonathan have spoken at length about on these podcasts, is Julian Clary. He's been doing pantomime ever since his career really started to take off. And every year you'll find him somewhere in the country performing live as either, a genie or a cat or a good fairy, or as the prince or the princess. He plays all these different roles. He's done the dame a few times as well. But that's just because his career has kind of been centered around a slightly campy persona, and the people who are paying to go know what they're going to get when they go to see him. So they get a sort of very dry, sarcastic character for an hour, and some people are quite happy to pay good money to go and see him do his thing for 10 minutes. And if there happens to be a story about Dick Whittington involved at some point, then so be it.
I will say, though, too, the fairy, from what I can tell, they are using her, at least the ones that I've watched, to replace the bells. Because I feel like I said, the bells are a confusing addition to this story. It almost just makes more sense to have the fairy be the person who foretells that he's going to be the mayor.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. But then I suppose when you're on a stage and you are trying to replicate the sounds of the Lucan sounds of bells going off and that whole aesthetic and vibe, it would probably be easier to just pay somebody, shilling and a half to turn up for 5 minutes in a pantomime and say, "You've got to go back, Dick. You're going to be Lord Mayor someday. I believe in you," than to spend extra money building bell props and licensing bell ringing sound effects and getting people to sing the Dick Whittington rhyme and all of those other elements. It's probably easier, cheaper, and you can also cram in a bit more talent if you know who to find to sort of say, "Oh, hey, Larry, we'll give you £20 a day if you come in and for 10 minutes turn up in a fairy costume and tell Dick he needs to go back to London." you know.
Well, besides the pantomime versions, I did find a few non-pantomime versions. Like, there are so few. There's like, I really was hoping I would find like at least one full-length version to talk about. I could not. The full-length things are all pantomimes. But I did find it interesting that there was an episode of a show that Jenna and I have talked about several times. In English, it's Manga Fairy Tales from Around the World, or some translation that means the same thing. But it's a Japanese anime show from the 70s. They do They do anything from Snow White to Les Mis. that
Very obscure ones too.
it's so random. I
Mm.
I should not have been surprised that they had a version of Dick Whittington, but they did. So I was interested, of course, to watch that because we've already talked about the show a few times. So it was interesting to see what they would do with this story. And before I watched it, I was thinking this story is so short, there's so little here that it's going to be very easy for them to fit it into their 10 to 12-minute episodes. And then they ended up still changing the story a bunch and adding in a bunch of stuff. And it still was a very big deviation from what I was expecting.
This is the thing. It's what I've been talking about. Is that because there is so much out there, anyone can really claim that they have the true version of the story. As long as those sort of key beats are there, it doesn't really matter. It's that I suppose unless you can find the oldest possible text of it, which I don't know how far back you'd have to go for that. You're kind of just stuck with, well, your guess is as good as mine with it.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is like the earliest texts available are probably already conflicting because, like you said, there were probably regional variants.
Yeah, because there's
Yeah.
300 years between when he lived and when they started writing stories. Because he was born in the 1300s, and the plays started happening in the 1600s. And the plays, I'm assuming, were based on something, so there would have been something written in between his lifetime and the plays, but I wouldn't know what the original was.
And one thing I did kind of observe that I wonder kind of had an effect on all this was apparently the real Richard Whittington did a lot of like public works in his service as mayor. Like he financed a number of public projects such as drainage systems in poor areas of London and a hospital ward for unmarried mothers. He bequeathed his fortune to form the charity of Sir Richard Whittington, which over 600 years later still continues to assist people in need. And I kind of wonder if the reason why his name has lasted this long, because there's actually not that much actual real information about him. We don't even know if he had a cat, like a real cat.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if like he's helped people so much, like in ways we may not even really ever know, that's kept his name in the spotlight. So I thought that was also another interesting thing about this folklore.
It is, and it's not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me of Santa, because Santa was a real person who did
Yeah.
good deeds, but no one fully knows like his exact true life story. He is ascended into legend.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a similar situation, except Dick Whittington didn't get a whole holiday to himself.
You also have the other complicated problem of the English language back in the 13th century being incredibly different from how the English language, even in the sort of 17th and 18th century, was.
Mm.
A lot of the language is more metaphysical. A lot of it uses words that had multiple interpretations or have become the case of having multiple interpretations. So even if you were to go back and find the first published, manuscript of the story of Dick Whittington, the language that it would be written in would have moments that the actual words were so vague because we hadn't evolved enough words to cover specific instances that you would probably create variations just from trying to translate it from ye olde English to a more modern parlance. So,
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much how the Bible is today, isn't it?
oh yeah,
Just
absolutely.
yeah.
Every so often they try and retranslate it, and every so often a completely different religion starts or variation there and thereof from it. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean that's also just like the interest of language over time, how connotations change.
Yeah.
Or I was just thinking the other day because I'm trying to better my coworkers by becoming a trainer. And I got the feedback that I never say you're welcome after someone thanks me. Instead, I say thank you, or I just say no problem. And I was just like, it's such a millennial thing. Because I don't know, we just thought it was like cool to say you're welcome at the time. And now I'm like, I'm struggling to say you're welcome.
I haven't given much thought, but I think I would have done the same thing. I always
Yeah.
say no problem.
Yeah. But like some people think that's rude to not say you're welcome. And part of me actually now sees, I guess when I was younger, I saw no problem or it as being like more friendly in a way of like, of course I would help you. Like, why wouldn't I, you know, why wouldn't I help you? But now it's like I'm seeing it more as a, I have done something and I deserve some appreciation for that. And so thank you for that appreciation. Like by saying you're welcome. So I don't know, it's just like the connotation of words over time, though, is just like my mom would have never dreamed of never saying you're welcome if she was in that situation. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's just that was a bit of a tangent, but just kind of the way language changes over time and depending
Hmm.
on who uses it.
Oh yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing. I mean, I studied it in college and sort of the first year of my time in university, and especially regional variances in language are genuinely just fascinating to see. I mean, it it always makes me laugh when like media sites and newspapers all do these kind of hit pieces on like Gen Z and Gen Alpha on look at these crazy words these kids are coming up with, and I'm like, I bet
Yeah.
you if you go back through the various manuscripts that survived from the 13th century, there'll be some monk writing the exact same thing about how
Hmm.
the kids today are using new words like hello and how are you, and it's deeply offensive. What was wrong with thou and they? Um,
Yeah, no, that actually has happened. Yeah, it has. Um,
yeah,
I can't remember
yeah.
the specific instance, but there's some historic text about someone complaining about children reading novels and it would
Yes.
rot their brains. You know,
I
stuff.
I think I read something about people complaining about people reading newspapers, like newspapers
Yeah.
were inferior to books somehow. And there was like people writing whole things about how terrible it was that kids these days were reading newspapers.
There's a fantastic article. You can find it via Google search pretty easily that I always like to kind of revisit occasionally, and it's just called "No One Wants to Work Anymore," and
I think I know what you're talking about. I think I've read
Oh,
this too.
and it's literally just like they've gone through all of the sort of newspapers and various sort of diaries and journals of people going back to the like the 1700s, the 1600s, and it's
Hmm.
just every single one of them has exactly the same sentiment. It's like, young Jebediah doesn't want to work the mill anymore. He prefers to laze in the fields and consult the tea leaves. Honestly, children today, no one wants to work anymore. And it's like, this is from the 1700s.
Uh-huh. Exactly. It's like the phrase, the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's it.
ironically, the more plays that Dick Whittington gets made, the less it stays the same.
And the thing about Dick Whittington, yeah, this is all. I just kidding, guys. This is all relevant to Dick Whittington. It's like with Dick Whittington, the consistency is that it always changes. So,
The consistency is in its inconsistency.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
The one thing we know is that we don't know.
Yeah. So, like in this adaptation, the bells are a bird. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it as I was watching it, but they made particular reference to him wearing a bauble hat, but the way they pronounce it, I was like, this is a reference to the bells. And then I just read on the Wikipedia page the bow or bow bells. So they were making a pun with the hat that they put on the bird that was supposed to be referencing the bells that promised he would be the mayor of London.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is weird
Um,
but clever. And I appreciated that even though the story was wildly different than literally any other version I've seen,
Are we
they
talking about
still,
adaptations now? Specific adaptations? Did I start? I did
it's
not
fine.
like the
We're
Steve.
all over the
I did not
place.
like the Stevie's version, to be honest.
so so this is the thing, and I'm very conflicted about this, but for different reasons, and I suppose it's because it requires the kind of context of CBBS in general to kind of be sort of known. So CBBS over here is essentially the BBC's version of Nick Jr.
Yeah.
It's supposed to basically be a kids channel for very, very young children. We're talking like basically you'd have this on from kids who are old enough to open their eyes to around about 5, maybe 6 years old, and then the idea is they transfer over to the more kid-based channel, which is CBBC. And I think a fundamental issue that I had with the CBeebies panto, both versions, this and the Alice in Wonderland version that we'll discuss at another time, is that this story feels too advanced for very, very young children, but
Mhm.
the channel it's going out on is predominantly aimed at like literal babies to young kids, but some of the concepts are a little bit too complex for them, so it kind of creates a bit of a problem where like when you see the pantomime, they keep cutting back to parents with their kids, and the vast majority of the cutaways that they do to the parents and the kids is the kid clearly turning to the parent and saying, "What does that mean?" and the parent having to explain it to them. And about 20 minutes into this panto, I kind of sat there and I went, right, so I'm watching a pantomime aimed at kids probably aged 5 to 7 that's going out on a channel aimed for kids between 1 and 5, where the kids won't remember this and don't understand what's happening, and the parents are having to explain everything to it. Am I effectively watching a bunch of parents watching a pantomime that they think is for their kids but is too complex for their kids? And at that point, my head hurt, so I just was like, okay, fine, I'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I felt like the biggest problem with that pantomime is it was kind of confused on its audience, I think.
Yeah,
And ended up making a lot of alterations to the story that I don't really think were for the better.
The story changes they made were bizarre. Like this
yeah.
this is the most deviation from the story of Dick Whittington of any of the versions that I have found so far. It almost bears no resemblance to the story of Dick Whittington.
Honestly, it almost kind of felt like they were scared to be in panto sometimes. Like, instead of a villain, everyone likes to boo the villain in a panto. At least I assume. I've only seen them digitally so far. But there's a real villain in this. There's like three bad baddies, bad rats. But at the end, they're good.
Sort of.
I don't know, it's kind of like prioritizing redemption, and I'm like, I don't know, is that what we need? Okay. I wasn't looking at your panto for a morality lesson, but okay.
That is true.
Yeah.
That was the other problem that I had with this panto actually as well, was the fact that it almost seemed so hands-off in wanting to be a panto. It felt more like you were watching some kind of Christmas play that just so happened to have one or two instances of sort of panto culture. Like I think there's a "he's behind you" moment, which is a big staple of pantomimes. And I think there's one instance of very mild, messy comedy. Like very mild, messy comedy.
That seems, that was something that I think we kind of figured out in the last episode. Like, there always seems to be something gross happening. And the way they did it for this one was so strange because, like, obviously you're not going to have the cat murder the rats in a show for babies. So the whole thing with them making custard cream to splat the rats, and that's supposed to deter them, that made no sense. Yes, exactly. I was like, why is this something that chases away the rats? Because they don't like getting wet. But then you have later on the rats have another gross thing. They're like throwing some sort of slime thing into the audience. And I'm like, I thought you just said that the rats didn't like gross things.
I think I can tell you exactly what happened with this for it to end up the way that it did.
It's a tradition of like custard, right?
Yeah. I think what happened was the execs behind CBeebies the channel were aware that their channel is for very, very young children. And I don't know if you know this about the UK, but we have a real passion for having a good moan about things. So if something upsets us or causes a problem, there are some people who are almost pathologically compelled to just moan and moan and moan about it until whatever happens is resolved. And then they move on to the next thing because it's just how they need to live their lives to function. Each to their own.
As long as they use the moaning for good.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. And I can already imagine the CBeebies execs going, okay, we're putting a pantomime out for a channel that's got children aged 1 to 5 or 6 potentially watching. What can we show and what can't we show, because we run the risk of having somebody call up and moan, and then the channel ends up in the newspapers, and we have to cancel the pantomime, and then we get backlash to the backlash, and then backlash to the backlash to the backlash, and before you know it, the whole thing spiraled off, and we just never make pantos again. And I think a lot of the harsher elements. So, for example, the panto dame, the foreign lands, the rats being killed, the rats being particularly nasty, even all of that was kind of, I think, probably governed out by committee. I think they just basically went, well, can we have rats being mean on a kids channel aged between 1 to 5? I don't think we can, because if we do, what if somebody rings up and complains that they were too mean, and then the newspapers are splashed with mean rats terrify children on on Christmas Eve, or if they did the foreign land story, it would be racist CBBS shuts down over Christmas gaff. And I think basically, I feel like this panto was almost generated out of a mild paranoia that they were going to upset somebody, so they sort of overcompensated and toned it down to the point where it just kind of ends up being a bit bland and not really connected to the main story at all. At least that was what I took from it. I just sort of thought, well, they're clearly playing it incredibly safe because they just don't want right-wing news channels spending the next 6 hours talking about woke pantomimes.
That's pretty much the same take my boyfriend had as well. I have to watch this. We were going in blind, so I was like, "Want to watch some of them with me?" And he was like, "Okay." And then we started with this one. He's like, "I hated it. It was not a panto." And he loves the panto dames, which I get after seeing some of the other dames and the other pantos. And this one, there is like a dame character, but she never is a dame character, and she's not the traditional kind of dame. She's just kind of boring. Yeah, and I guess that's in the sense it just this like it feels like it's afraid to be a traditional panto, which aren't very politically correct sometimes, but not in a bad way. I don't know. It's whatever. If people would take issue with it.
It's kind of boundary pushing, but within the realms of taste. Like they will do a lot of inference and a lot of double innuendos, but they're designed intentionally to fly over the heads of kids and embarrass the adults.
It just felt like it was really scared of doing that, and it just ended up being really boring instead.
Yeah, weird. And I think the main reason for that was that it was going out on a very young children's channel, and they just didn't want to inflame people. Yeah, like if this had gone out on the other channel, CBBC, which is aimed more for kids aged kind of 6 to 13, I think they would have been much more open to the idea of doing a little bit more naughty humor, doing a little bit more, being a bit more rude, being a bit more outspoken. But I feel like they were being pulled in so many directions with this. You can't be too boundary pushing because it's for very young children. At the same time, we need to keep it as simple as possible, but not too simple. Again, I think my biggest problem is it just has a real identity crisis about what it actually wants to be. Like, if they were actually targeting the audience that were going to be watching it, they would have made it even simpler than it was presented, which would have probably made it even shorter as a result. But
it just seems like a strange story to choose if you're going to be so afraid of everything. Like, surely, like, just thinking, I don't know if Puss in Boots is a popular pantomime, but I feel like that would be a better fit because it's a cat in boots doing spectacular things. How offensive could that get?
Well, this is it. I mean, another common panto is Jack and the Beanstalk. They could have done that. That would have probably worked quite well because you just need Jack, a giant, and probably someone. They could have got the pigeon to play the golden goose, and that would have been,
Yeah. Or the golden harp, or whatever version you're doing. But it's just kind of why Dick Whittington if you're going to be so afraid of it. It just made me frustrated by the end.
Yeah, the story was so different than all the other. It's just such weird changes. Like,
there's actually a Lord Mayor who's not Dick Whittington. Was also a weird addition.
That was an interesting point as well. Now, usually when I've done this in the past with Jonathan, I kind of go through the cast list and kind of go, oh, and this person's from here, and they had a very successful career doing da-da-da-da-da, and 10 years from now, they'll go on to do da-da-da-da-da. With this, I really struggled to recognize anybody from these pantos. The vast majority of them were presenters for the CBeebies channel. So, unlike Nick Jr., on CBeebies in between programs, they would have little host segments where two very smiley presenters would kind of either talk about the program that had just been on and maybe do like an engagement activity with the kids. So they'd say, oh, I really enjoyed that episode of Bluey. Why don't we all do a Bluey dance? And then they'll sort of dance for a bit, and then they'll go, well, that was great. Here's another episode of Bluey. And then it'll go on to the next thing. Or they'll do birthdays where they sort of call out people and say happy birthday to da-da-da-da-da. The vast majority of the cast, both for this one and the Alice in Wonderland panto, come from those presenters. There were a good chunk of them were just actors who were kind of hired in to play parts in the panto, but the majority of them were the CBeebies presenters. The Lord Mayor was the only one who I recognised as somebody who wasn't a presenter. His performing name is Mr. Tumble, and he's genuinely, he is a movement unto himself. He's been doing this for about 20 years, and he kind of dresses up like a clown. And he specializes in being like an entertainment figure for very, very young children, and specifically very young children who have disabilities. So things like deafness or blindness or learning difficulties, things like that. And he specializes in creating children's content for that specific audience. And he sort of splits the room. There is a group of parents who think that he's like the greatest thing ever and such a kind and nice man because he is incredibly generous with his time. He usually spends most of the year traveling up and down the country, going to holiday camps and performing in small venues for sort of specialist experiences with kids so that they can really have a nice day or really sort of pick things up. But then the other half of the country absolutely hate him because he's bloody everywhere. If you were a UK parent with kids of a particular age, there is a 99% chance that you will probably see Mr. Tumble at least once every couple of days. So he really just kind of split the room. Me, I kind of like Mr. Tumble. I think he's a fun and very generous guy, at least from what I've read and seen about him. But yeah, he does split a room sometimes, and I thought he was fine as the Lord Mayor in this. Like, for the 5 minutes he's on screen,
boring, to be honest.
Yeah,
it didn't make any sense. Like, okay, why are you giving this very important hammer to this boy who just came to your city? Like, you just met him.
Yeah, basically.
And it's, like, going to ruin this festival thing. It's like gonna ruin. Oh yeah, and the hammer and bell are magical or something. It's
and have the power to turn people into rats, which is like,
or have a Merry Christmas or something.
Well, you guys,
either or. You
guys don't have a golden rat hammer. That's in every town hall in the UK.
Good to know.
Like Groundhog. Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day. They break the emergency glass every Christmas, and they sort of hold the hammer to the bell and go, "Shall we all be rats this year?" And they sort of have audiences shout,
"No rats!"
Yeah. And the Lord Mayor will kind of put his hand to his ear and go, "I think I hear some yeses," and everybody goes, "No," and they go, "Okay, no rats this year. Go and have a good Christmas, everyone. Bye bye. Next year we might do rats, but."
I can't even judge that. If that, I know you're not telling the truth. I know that's fake, but we have Groundhog's Day. I can't judge if that was true.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
I can't judge.
I'm joking. We destroyed all the rat hammers in World War II.
I wish it was real, though. That sounds
amazing. It should be a thing now.
As the last of the Spitfires landed on the airstrip, we said no more to Rat Christmas, and we threw them all into a giant pit. Occasionally one turns up on eBay, but...
Shall we start our own island nation and just have and we tell the children that everywhere else they're having Rat Christmas.
Of course, these days you get these political parties starting up going, let's bring back the Rat Christmas hammers, you know. The war on Rat Christmas has been going for many years now. Make Rat Christmas great again is what I say. You know.
Merry Christmas, Ratigan. Oh, people who haven't seen that panto are gonna be so confused.
Rat Christmas is my favourite part of the Dick Whittington story.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and the rat parade. I forgot that too.
Yeah.
I like how
Can't
the
have Rat
parade.
Christmas without a rat parade.
The absolute highlight of Rat Christmas, I'll have you know.
Yeah. We could wear our ears that suspiciously look like Mickey Mouse ears, but we can't say anything to him.
And that one rat who plays the trumpet for some reason.
And is extremely Scottish.
Yes. You see, I thought when they did that, I thought that the third rat was going to have an Irish accent, and it was going to be like the three rats were Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, because you know there's a Welsh rat and a Scottish rat, but no, it was just an English rat. And I was like, well, what was the point in making them distinctly Scottish and Welsh if you weren't going to make a thing of it?
That's something I can moan about.
Yeah, well. Newspapers the next day, Ireland left out of woke rat nonsense. They had to have them executed. It was a terrible day for all involved. Mr. Tumble cried for 20 minutes.
Oh no, not Mr. Tumble. Not the tumble tears.
The pigeon was executed by firing squad. As they lined him up, they heard him say, "Coo, coo."
They just told him to turn around.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so dark. Maybe cut that out.
Luckily for him, in his back pocket, he had a copy of the Pigeon Bible, and the Bible deflected the bullet, and he was able to fly away. It didn't stop them; they just reloaded and shot again. But this has gone to a very strange dystopian place.
This is why we need to start our own island nation.
I haven't even started drinking yet, and we're already at pigeon executions and
anti-rat Christmas. Yeah. Anyway, so these are what we'll tell the children, so they'll never leave.
And every Christmas we sit the children down and explain how when we had Christmas, it was nothing but rats and firing squads. Every year we sacrificed Dick Whittington's cat to appease the Lord Big Ben.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, I brought in Big Ben weirdly. That was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say this about the CBeebies panto. There was one thing I really thought they could have done that would have completely changed the dynamic and probably made it a lot better for it. And that was in the last pantomime me and Jonathan watched. Mark Williams played a character called the Rat King, who he was phenomenal in that. And I think that if he had been in this pantomime playing that same character with those three as underlings, it would have been incredible. It would have instantly knocked it up at least 2 or 3 notches for me.
That would have improved it. It was I sent a link. I said you didn't have to watch it if you didn't want to. It was the one we already did a podcast on.
I think I did attempt it, but to be honest, after 15 minutes, it just wasn't my humor. So I was like, I'd rather watch the Great British Baking Show. To be honest,
Fair.
I went to do that instead. But yeah, I watched the other pantos that were listed. I really, really liked the one from the Roses. That was my favorite one.
That's probably my favorite panto dame of any panto dame I've seen.
Oh, the dame was great.
I loved her, Sarah the cook. She was great.
That one had much more in line with what I would say is a local pantomime experience.
I wondered.
Yeah, it was good, and it was again very well handled in the sense of, it managed to hit those panto tropes, but I would say that would be an upper budget local experience. Not necessarily a good example of what you would generally find in a city that was doing multiple pantomimes, but it's a slightly more polished experience of the local pantomime experience.
Yeah, I loved it. And then I liked the Rat King too. Like I don't know if this just sounds Shakespearean to you guys, but he sounded Shakespearean to me as an American, and I thought it really added to his character, just the way he like enunciated his words. I don't know. It was just a very good pantomime. I enjoyed it. I was actually like, you know what? If I'm ever in Tewksbury, I will go to that. That looks like a good place.
Mm.
I was a little
Oh yeah,
like
no.
concerned because their like notification on the video was something like they're gonna go out of business because of COVID. So I went to go look them up. They're still in business, thank goodness.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a thing, and it's one thing that I always advocate for is if you are in the UK and a local pantomime is performing, try and support them if you can, because they're usually a lot of these companies at most break even when they put these
Mm,
productions on, and sometimes they run at a loss just purely because they love the art of it.
yeah.
Um, so, and especially with the sort of ongoing cost of living crisis in the UK and the US, any support
And
that you can give to these local venues to continue to do these kind of shows just means that they can keep the magic going. There have been drives in the past to fundraise for pantomimes, not necessarily to just fund the pantomime happening from a props and sort of set building standpoint, but also to help subsidize ticket costs. So there was a local pantomime in my area where they did a fundraiser to raise money to buy all of the sort of props and costumes and stuff for the show. But then they made a little bit more than they needed. So what they did was they took that additional funding and used it to subsidize the cost of the tickets, allowing them to buy back some tickets, which they then gave to a local food bank. So people who were going there for food parcels and food packages could get a ticket to go and see a show that they probably otherwise
oh,
wouldn't have been able to attend. It was really nice.
Hmm.
So
that's
if you
really
can
nice.
support your local pantomimes, please do.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Hmm.
It's not really a thing here.
I did ask Jonathan in the last
Yeah.
podcast just before we signed off. I said to him, "How do you feel a traditional British pantomime would go down in America?" And I can't exactly remember your response, Jonathan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say something along the lines of it would depend on whether the audience were aware of what a pantomime was?
I think it would also depend on the region you put it in. I think a pantomime in like the southern states, depending on the state too, could go really badly.
Yeah, just a smidge.
It does depend, and it like
Yeah,
if you had it in a city too,
Mm,
like a
yeah,
city would be different than just a random town in the middle of nowhere.
mm,
yeah.
mm.
Especially, I'm just gonna say the Dame would be offensive to some communities. But like where I live in California, I think it'd probably be okay. It would just be like getting people to afford to what a pantomime is and
Mm.
getting them to go. Also, I think money
Yeah.
because I feel like people are struggling with entertainment costs right now.
Mm.
Um, but if it's an alternative, if it's affordable alternative to like say going to Disneyland, I think some people would choose to go to a pantomime instead if they had the option.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, this is
because
the thing. I mean, a lot of these pantomime shows as well tended to be subsidized costs based on other theatrical productions. They would be lower cost purposely because they wanted to try and ensure that kids could go and see these shows affordably. Because, when times are hard and things are a little bit difficult, it's nice to be able to give kids something that they can kind of get into the Christmas spirit of. I don't want to get too sickly sweet when I say this, but Panto is funny, but it is also kind of uplifting. And I think that if you are a kid in a broken home or a low income with a low income family, being able to pay, I don't know, £5 to go and see an hour and a half, 2 hours of bizarre over the top comedy with a very kind of soaring message would take you away from that kind of darkness a little bit and maybe give you something that you can kind of hold on to when when times are getting a little bit tough. So,
yeah, I think the only thing equivalent to like a traditional Christmas show we have is probably like seeing the Nutcracker Ballet,
mm.
which a lot of people do not like ballet, so not everyone likes to do that.
Hmm.
There was as well
Yeah.
quite recently quite a controversy on the Panto front, and I know controversy and Panto have never mixed before.
I've
Um,
heard. Yeah.
But essentially, there was, I think it was last year or the year before, a few pantomimes in the UK decided to do what was it called? I can't remember the exact wording they used for it, but it was essentially like a sensitivity show. And
Um,
what they would do is they would run the pantos as normally, but they would have one or two pantomimes ring fenced where if you had issues with loud noises, if you had issues with harsh lighting or sudden lighting, if you had issues with audience interaction, if you had problems with scary characters or scary situations or scenarios, they would do a show where up front they would all come out in costume on stage. They would talk to the audience very openly about their character, who they are, that they're not really very scary, that they're lovely people really, but they have to play scary. They would take their costumes off to show the kids that they weren't like scary guys and girls. They were actually just normal people wearing makeup and wigs and big costumes and stuff. Um,
hmm.
they would also tone down all the loud noises on purpose. They would make sure like explosions were very quiet, or they would replace the explosions with like more gentle sounds. They wouldn't have indoor fireworks. They would have the house lights on for the full duration of the panto rather than it being a dark room. And they just did all of these various things to kind of enable kids who maybe had sensitivity issues around all of those various things to be able to still go and enjoy the show. And the UK lost its mind for a very long time about it. There were people
Oh, really?
genuinely,
I used to
yeah,
know someone who was advocating for those.
yeah,
Random, but apparently the Globe in London is actually really has been accommodating about that kind of thing for a while now. By the way,
yeah,
so
yeah.
shout out for them. But she was trying to advocate for more theaters to do these kind of showings because she loved theater, but she was sensitive to loud noises herself. So that's
Mm.
really disheartening that apparently progress was made and people lost their minds about it. Like,
This
what the
was
heck?
this was Yeah, absolutely. This was the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought that it was a really good idea. You know, my partner has autism, I have ADHD, and as a kid,
Mm.
I used to be a bit jumpy around loud noises, flashing lights hurt my eyes, and people in costumes when I was a very young kid used to give me a little bit of a vibe about it.
Mm.
If I could have gone to one of those shows as a kid, I'd have been really, really happy with it. But you get these, let's say, traditionalists who come out and go, "Well, I went to these shows and I was terrified, and I grew up perfectly fine. I only have night terrors 3 times a week.
I was
Why
just gonna
can't other
say,
kids experience this?"
did you though?
Basically,
Anytime someone says I turned out fine, I always think in my head, did you though?
I went through it, so you have to go through it. But it's like
But,
it's not. It's so weird though because it's always an opt-in thing that they get upset about. Like this isn't
mm,
the normal experience. Like this is something you would have to pay to go, like choose to go to.
Yeah.
You're not being forced.
no, absolutely. I don't know. I think there are some people out there who hear that something is being done to be accommodating to people and either think, well, I didn't have that luxury, so they shouldn't, or
Yeah.
they think that it's enabling people who shouldn't be seen, which I
Or
think is a
like a
horrendous.
slope. It's a slippery slope. It's going to turn all the performances that way or something. It's
Yeah.
like,
Before you know it, you won't even get to go and be startled by a man dressed in a giant frock and a wig and then get covered in custard. I tell you, the country is going to the dogs. If I'm allowed to
but
scream in children's faces.
the reality is those viewings don't those showings don't even make that much money. So it's like there's
Hmm,
nothing to be worried about really. Like so what they
yeah,
have one or two. Oh, oh
yeah,
no.
This
this is it. I
sounds like
mean,
what you
them
were
doing
saying
it.
before about people loving moaning. This just seems like they found something. Oh, looky, a new thing we can moan about.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is absolutely, absolutely. It gives something for the news channels to run as a kind of additional story to their roster, and it fills up the comments section on Facebook, and that is about it. Because you're not taking anything away from any child who doesn't want to have that experience. You're just giving the opportunity for children who couldn't go and see it in its natural standpoint, the chance to experience something on their terms that they want to be engaged in. But like I say, you do get these people who are a bit stuck in their ways with things like that. I think it's fair to say. There was a
I think it's very
statistic.
fair to say that, yeah.
Yeah, there was a statistic the other day that blew my mind that said something like 66% of adults can't apply a scenario to another person when presented with a scenario, they can only apply it to themselves. So if you said to somebody, imagine you didn't have breakfast today, their first response would be, but I did have breakfast. And you go, yeah, but imagine you didn't. And they go, yeah, I did. I had pancakes. And you're like, no, no,
Or
that's not what I'm saying.
or it's like, oh, imagine you didn't have breakfast. Oh, that would be terrible. I love eating breakfast. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, well, that happened to our friend. Maybe we could buy them breakfast. It's like, why would I do that?
yeah.
You know?
I figured out how to have breakfast. Why can't they? And it's like that. You're
Yeah,
missing the point. That's
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dick Whittington, guys, and the magic rat hammer of the North.
Anyways, we didn't talk about a couple things.
Okay. Well, what are the couple things?
The Iwerks short
Ah,
and the Roald Dolls version.
I don't really have
I
much to say about those two, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm pretty light on my notes for the two.
Well, for the Iwerks one, I just thought it was interesting that, well, for one, that they actually made this, because as far as I know, Iwerks is American. Like, he was Walt Disney's partner. So it's interesting that maybe the story was more widely known back then, but like, it's interesting to me that an American would make an adaptation of this story, first of all. And I also thought it was interesting who worked on it with him, because the music was by Carl Stalling, who is the guy behind the music for Looney Tunes. Like, this is not a Looney Tunes short. This is not a Disney short. This was a Comic Color cartoon. I don't know. Like, I feel like I've seen that logo, but I don't know anything about this studio. And I'm wondering at what point in Ub's relationship with Walt Disney this happened. Because I know for a while they had a falling out. Do you know, Jenna? Did he leave Disney at this time, or?
He would have left Disney at this time, yeah.
Okay, that's what I was
I
thinking.
know he was trying to strike it out on his own. If I remember correctly, it didn't. I'm sorry, I'm not as well educated on Iwerks as I am Walt Disney. But from what I understand, he ended up going back to Disney at some point because making it out on his own didn't work out.
Mm-hmm. But that was years later.
Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure when this took place.
Well, this was released. I saw the date by accident, but I made note of it because it was released May 30th, 1963, which is exactly 50 years before I was born.
Oh. Okay. Did you say the 60s?
1936.
Oh,
You said 1963.
Okay.
I was sitting there for a second.
Oh,
going,
did
John,
I?
How old are you? You're born in the 2010s.
Yeah.
I must have.
Okay, Zoomer.
I must have
Yeah, I heard that too.
swapped it around. No, 1936, not 63.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, I would not be old enough to have a podcast if that were the case.
I was going to say having a
think you are.
full
I think
beard
you
and
would be old enough.
goatee is kind of wild for being like 12.
But yeah, 1936 I think was before he started working for Disney again. Yeah, he was trying his own studio at that time. His dad was a German immigrant though, so like I guess he could have heard of Dick Whittington from
Yeah,
his dad maybe. I don't know.
but even so, this short, again, it almost has nothing to do with the original folktale. This more focuses on the cat. It is more Looney Tunes inspired than anything else, because it's about the cat who is afraid of rats. At some point, Dick puts him on a ship to save him from the cook. The cook is male in this version, and he gets knocked out with fright. Like, he faints because the rats are going to behead him, and then he loses all of his 9 lives at once, which appear as spirits which fight off the rats. It is bizarre.
My
Like, the
favorite
pantomime,
episode of Dragon Ball Z.
The CBeebies pantomime was bizarre. This is bizarre in a whole different way.
Absolutely. And this was honestly, of all of the short adaptations you sent to me, this one was my favorite. Because it felt more like an accompanying piece to Dick Whittington than an adaptation of Dick Whittington. It's like, if you've seen the Dick Whittington story, you can watch this and kind of go, oh, okay, this is an interesting take on that idea. I don't know if it necessarily hold up as an example. If somebody said, oh, tell me the story of Dick Whittington, if you showed them this, they would have no idea what Dick Whittington was actually about. But I thought it was a nice kind of rubber hose way to sink 7 to 8 minutes. And I had a nice time with it.
I was just like, it's a typical 1930s cartoon. I didn't really have much to think about it, to be honest.
There were a couple of slightly iffy moments towards the back end of it, but other than
Oh,
that,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, typical 1930s cartoon. Yeah,
It was just missing the smoking. If it had got more smoking in it, I think I'd have been
yeah.
completely on the level with it. But
The short video I liked the most weirdly was actually like I think it was just reading a storybook out loud with like illustrations.
Yeah.
But I
hmm.
was like, that is a cute cat. That was my favorite.
We also had one by Roald Dahl, which wasn't animated or acted out. It was just an excerpt from his book Rhyme Stew, which I thought I had read, but I don't think I've heard this. So maybe I have not read this. It must have been something else that I've read of his. I'm not even sure this was supposed to be for kids. Maybe it was,
No,
but
no,
this is
definitely not. It
no.
was very crass.
The Lord, this has a different Lord that he's like the Lord Mayor is Lord Hollispont. Like there's no Fitzwarren. And I think Hollispont was only there for rhyming reasons, and his wife is cheating on him and he shoots her.
Yeah.
This was bizarre. Like when I started watching it, I thought this was going to be like I've seen other short stories by Roald Dahl, which are always weird, but I assumed that this was like something for kids. And then when you had him shooting his cheating wife multiple times, because it's not like deadly bullets, I think it was like buckshot or something. I was like, what is this story?
I'm pretty sure he had content meant for adults as well, and I believe this is
Yeah.
definitely one of them. This is I'm going to create sacrilege in the child lit fandom, but I don't really like Roald Dahl. I don't know, I just don't vibe. So I was just kind of like, the whole time. Okay. All
I think I
right.
kind of think I kind of sit between the two of you. I like some Roald Dahl, but there are other Roald Dahls where I'm kind of like, no.
I haven't
There's
read all of his stuff, but the ones that I've read, I mostly liked his work. Like I loved Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Those were my favorites when I was a kid.
mm,
And then I
oh,
read The
same.
Witches, and I was traumatized. I hated
Yeah,
the end of that
yeah.
book.
Oh yeah. Who doesn't love that ending? It's amazing.
Mm,
Yeah, I like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I like The Witches. The Twits is probably my favorite
Oh,
because
I
it's
liked
just
that as a kid too. It was
such a
weird, but I liked it.
bizarre, yeah, such an odd story, but I do have a soft spot for it. But a lot of his other stuff, like Danny and the Champion of the World and James and the Giant Peach and stories like that, I don't know. I'm just kind of a bit iffy about, and I had a real problem with this particular extract from Rhyme Stew. I was reading it, but I just could not stay focused on it because it was so all over the place in terms of what it was trying to sort of say and do.
Yeah.
Um, that I'd find myself kind of zoning out whilst trying to read and take it on
same.
board. Yeah, I mean, was it inherently bad? I don't think so. There were some bits where I was kind of like, okay, that's a bit dark for a kid's book, but fair enough. Um, but yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea. I just kind of got to the end of it and was like, well, that was 6 minutes.
Yeah.
On to
See, like I don't think
CBeebies.
it is meant for kids at all. Like she's cheating and she's being shot at. I don't know. I think this is meant for adults, which is fine. I just didn't care for it.
The one part that I did like was the bells, because in this version they explained that the bells are calling to him specifically because there's a local priest who has rigged up a sound system to trick the poor country folk. That cracked me up.
That was good. That was good. I just looked into it, and apparently Rhyme Stew was intended to be released for children and came out in
Oh no.
1989.
Well, there you go. See, he and I don't vibe.
I know.
No, he
Roald
likes to
Dahl had some,
traumatize the kids.
yeah, he had some very interesting opinions, Roald Dahl. Let's leave it at
Yeah.
that.
I liked the American movie Matilda, so I thought I'd read the book, and I was just like, you know what, I don't. They changed it a lot for the movie.
Hmm.
Because I don't like the story that much.
I feel like I
Um,
read Matilda once as a kid and I liked it. I only saw the movie once as a kid, but I also liked that. I saw the movie of the musical a couple of years ago, and I really liked that.
Really?
The musical on Netflix. I thought that was great.
I didn't
Written
like
by
it.
Tim Minchin.
The
Yeah.
scene with all the kids dancing through the school, I was like, I cannot imagine wrangling all of these kids. Like there's like hundreds of kids, and this is not CGI. This is like actual children. I was just I was blown away by how well put together that was.
Mm. I have my own thoughts on it for just because I prefer to do pro shots of theatrical productions.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the dance scene was very well done.
Hmm.
Is there a pro shot of the Matilda musical?
I don't think so, and that's kind of part of my problem with it is that
Mm,
they don't want to pay stage actors because of basically the equity, like the union rights they have.
mm.
So instead, they want to do movie versions of musicals, and that was like one of the like that was basically their attempt at doing that. So it just rubbed me the wrong way from the beginning. I was like, okay, I'll try it, but I don't know, I was just kind of like, I wish, there was a pro shot of the stage production.
I wish that
Um,
for any musical that I've seen that I really like, I want the pro shots, and they either don't make them or they lock them away so no one can see them.
well, that's why pro shots of stage musicals end up being done in the UK because it's cheaper to do that.
Mm.
I don't know if there was ever one for the was there one for Matilda? I don't think so in the UK. I know there was one for Heathers. Anyway, sorry, we're getting off track.
Someday I want to do a series on roll doll stuff. Maybe by then we'll find a pro shot.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Anyways, Dick Whittington.
Mhm.
I think we mostly talked about all of them. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on the Mango Fairy Tales from Around the World short.
Not, not
Was that the
really.
2-minute one, or
It was 12 minutes.
It was
I
the one where they don't have a very good art style, to be honest. And he went with the cat.
Yeah, that's about the only thing that I really liked about that one. I thought I was going to like this one more than I did, and as soon as it started, like, because you can't understand it, it's in Japanese. I was like, this is both boring and uninteresting to look at.
It was definitely one of the least interesting art styles of the series.
Yeah.
So for context, Dan, every single episode of manga Sekaibo Mukashi Banashi has a different art style that's like being done by a different team of animators essentially.
yeah.
Um, and some of them very cool art styles. Like there's been some amazing things, and then this one was very yeah. Like
Uh,
um, the more interesting part of it was more that they chose to have Dick go on the adventure with the cat.
Hmm.
Um,
ah.
that was the more interesting part.
Well, I mean, I'd probably check out the other ones then at least and see if they're any good. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it's from the sounds of it. It sounds like overall Dick Whittington is kind of dull, but depending on who's writing it, it could be less dull.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say I do prefer the versions where he's actually involved in the adventure and slash or actually gets the cat back. Because
Yes.
I will say it's kind of surprising to me that the story has lasted so long, and I think it definitely needed to adapt because it seems like the original version of the story, he just like sold his cat, got money and all as well. It's like, wow, kids like animals though. Like they would never want to sell their cat. So it makes sense that the story has adapted over time.
I personally look forward to seeing where Dick Whittington goes in the next 70 years. Maybe to space. That
I
could be a
was
good
just
one.
going to say that they've done that with other stories. There's at least two versions of Pinocchio that I have not seen yet that is sci-fi. I think he goes to space in both of them. One of them he's a robot. Yeah,
There's an Alice that goes to space,
there
apparently,
is.
in ballet form. Yeah.
Okay, well, we need to add that to our list of things to do a podcast on. I didn't know this existed.
It's a ballet though, so like, keep your expectations not necessarily on the floor, but not high up either.
Well, that other ballet we did was good. It was
Yeah,
weird,
but
but it
that
was
that's the cream of the crop.
okay.
Will there be one-liners? If there's not one-liners, I'm out.
In a
I want
ballet,
limericks.
but like Yeah, so like Dick Whittington is just kind of to me. It's an interesting story. I like it better when he goes with the cat and they end up
Yeah.
together. Those are my ending thoughts.
Yeah, me too.
I'd agree.
I think I can see why the preferred form to do this in is pantomime. Of all the ones we've watched, the pantomime ones were by far my favorite ones. Not counting the CBeebies one, that was kind of strange.
I'm still inclined to say that was really more of a Christmas play than a pantomime. Just purely
it
because,
was, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it tried sort of very vaguely to put some panto elements in, but it was really more of a just sort of dancing around on stage and singing a bit type affair rather than the blood of panto being coursing through its veins.
But yeah, if anybody's interested, there's plenty of pantomime versions of Dick Whittington on YouTube. So one of them, I'm sure, will be entertaining to you because they all are different. You just kind of have to watch a few minutes and see if it speaks to you.
And tonight we're going to cover them all, starting from the first that shows up in the search.
Even if it kills us.
We've locked the doors, you're not leaving.
Well, I think that will be all for this episode. We will be back eventually because there's at least one other one that we're going to be talking about, not Dick Whittington related. We're going to be covering an Alice in Wonderland at some point. But until then, you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they would like more from you?
For Alice content, you can find me at Phantomwise on YouTube. And for other content, anything, Love Gifts of a Fairy Tale on YouTube.
Fabulous stuff. Thank you so much again for having me, Jonathan. You can find me at TYTD Reviews on YouTube and Letterboxd and Blue Sky. I cover strange and bizarre films from across the world, going back as far as the late 19th century and as recent as last year. Come and have a look at us, check us out, and if you are on Blue Sky, drop me a line and say hi. And thanks again, Jonathan, for having me.
Thank you. We will see you again soon. Thanks for listening to this podcast on the John Cast Network. We'll be back soon with another episode, but in the meantime, make sure you follow my co-hosts. I'll have their links in the description, along with links to all our latest episodes, all my socials, and my Patreon, where you can find bonus and extended episodes, and get early access to most episodes, sometimes up to a week in advance. Make sure to subscribe to this show on whichever podcast platform you prefer, and follow the John Cast Network on YouTube for more podcasts covering all kinds of things beyond just what you'll find here. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.